Serious, what is the downright scariest thing that has ever happened to you, be it paranormal or otherwise? I fell asleep on the couch at around 6 to 7 PM and woke up at 4 AM in the middle of my backyard when it was raining. I was about 5 or 6 years old living in Dallas, and I was in the nurse's office when the tornado warning siren went off. The nurse ran out of the room towards the other side of the school, leaving me behind. The lights had gone off and I didn't want to be alone, so I went to follow her and ended up on this ramp that connected both sides of the school. To the right of me was the cafeteria and on my left was a wall with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was so dark outside that I could barely see anything out the window. The sound of the siren combined with the intense wind scared me the most. By this point I was in tears and I just stood there for who knows how long because I was so scared. Then the vice principal came running up the ramp, scooped me in her arms and asked whose class I was in. I remember walking into the classroom and seeing my teacher with a flashlight in her hands huddled with the other students in the middle of the classroom. 16 years later, Ms. May is still my hero. What a crappy nurse. One time I woke up and my eyes were super dry, like, beyond description. I opened them and it was pitch black. Couldn't see a thing. But I knew there was light in the room since my alarm went off, so it must have been 8 AM at least. I literally felt my eyelids to make sure they weren't closed. I shut them and cried for like a minute to moisturize them and I could see again. So yeah, waking up blind is not a fun thing to have happen. Flying from Denver to Nick. About 30 seconds after the plane leaves the ground, the left engine explodes. Likely a bird, they said. I'm pretty calm, but start getting freaked out when I notice the stewardess are all crying. Completely freaked out when we are getting close to landing and there are fire trucks all up and down the runway. And the runway we are landing at is way the heck away from the terminal and everything else. Whoa. So I don't wish this situation upon anyone. But if it ever does happen to anyone, you must get on the next flight. Some of my fellow passengers opted to take a train home. If I'd done that, I'm positive I would have never flown again. I swear I read somewhere that the #1 reason why planes are grounded is because birds hit the windows or the engines and cause damage. Fell 75 feet off a cliff when I was in my 20s. I was pretty sure I was going to die, but I got lucky. When I was 16, I was at a local mall by myself. I noticed a large man kept going where I would go, and just gave me a bad gut feeling. After about 15 minutes of him following me around, I go into a Starbucks and sure enough he follows. This Starbucks was right next to the mall's public restroom, and I so stupidly decided to go into the women's room. Thinking he wouldn't follow, I go into a stall, lock the door, and pull my feet up so they can't be seen since the stall's lot didn't continue to the floor. No more than 10 seconds later I hear the bathroom door open and someone walking in. The man stopped in front of my stall door and just stands there, facing it for what felt like minutes. He was so close to the door his boots were pretending into the stall. Then, without any words spoken from either of us, he left and I never saw him again. Scariest few minutes of my life, and I'm still so mad at myself for isolating myself in a bathroom. Opening my front door to see 12 armed police officers about to raid the house. 2 of my friends were spending the night at my parents' house. We were all still in high school. My bedroom was a room away from the kitchen, connected by a pantry and a hallway. I heard the back door handle jiggle, which meant a cat wanted to go outside. So I went to let it out and get a drink. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed there was no cat there, and the door to the basement was wide open, which we always left closed and locked. So I closed and locked the basement door. A tad unnerved, but it didn't matter. Next to the basement door was a staircase that went upstairs to the 2nd floor. This is relevant later. A couple hours later I hear the fridge door close. I noticed that because I didn't hear it open, but it was in a different room, so that's not too weird. What made it weird was that I didn't hear anyone walk down the stairs or by my bedroom from the front of the house. The back stairs to the 2nd floor are really loud and creaky, so I would have heard something. Unnerved, I took a knife and went into the kitchen. I see no one in there, but immediately notice smoke coming up from under the basement door. I opened it up and it was filled with smoke. Closed it, got my parents up, call the fire dept, go get ready to sleep in my car for the night, as it was about 4 AM at this point. A firefighter comes and tells us it's okay to go back into the house now. For some reason the furnace had caught fire inside and was filling the house with carbon monoxide. Had my friends and I went to sleep, we'd all be dead. Still have no clue what jiggled the doorknob or closed the fridge, but it kept me alive. Carbon monoxide causes people to be delusional. There was actually a thread pretty recently about a guy who thought he was being stalked in his own apartment, but it turned out he was carbon monoxide in his apartment and he was forgetting the note it he'd been leaving for himself. I was asleep in bed one night and my mom, who had recently taken interest in home security, had put a wooden dowel in my bedroom window and forgot to tell me about it. It was obviously a redneck version of a window lock, because we lived in an old house and didn't have locks on the windows for some reason. Anyhow, I found out later that there was an electrical fire in the hallway outside my bedroom, and I woke up to smoke slipping into my bedroom from beneath my door. Being a little kid, I was scared shitless and had no idea what was going on at the time, and so being smart, I thought to try and get out my window, but I couldn't get the dowel out. I spent what felt like 10 minutes trying to get my little fingers around it and slip it out of the window sill but couldn't. Finally, my mom got into my bedroom, grabbed me and wrapped a wet towel around me, and supermommed us out of the house, and me safely out of trouble. Best part, she went back in, got our fire extinguisher from under the kitchen sink and put that fire out herself. Thankfully, it wasn't some huge, home-destroying catastrophe. We had a baby monitor that, besides sound, also monitored the baby's breathing and set off an alarm. SIDS. The alarm would go off on the baby's side to jar them, and also the parent's remote. One night we forget to turn up the sound and in the middle of the night I roll over and see the lights pegged. I freaking fly out of bed screaming to my wife. Darting into the nursery, I suddenly find no freaking baby in the crib. I suddenly realize my wife must have brought the little guy to our bed and forgot to turn off the alarm. I wheel around and pass her coming in and say he's in our bed and she screams bloody murder because this, she knows for a fact, is not the case. My whole world just stopped with absolute abject terror. She screams WHO took my baby somehow, through massive adrenaline rush and massive fright. I Sherlock Holmes it, house alarm is still armed. No windows or doors could have been opened. The nursery door was closed. He must still be in the room. Glance around and see the only place he possibly could be is behind under the crib. I fall to my hands and knees and lo and behold little dude is on his belly looking at me, smiling. Even thought mom is hysterical. I reach under and gently pull him out by his ankles and mom meanwhile sees us and assumes he's not alive because how the heck does a 1-year-old climb out of a high-sided crib when he can't even stand and manage a 4-foot fall unharmed? She scooped him up and cried for an hour rocking him. I didn't sleep that night. Little monster has had us guessing ever since. I saw something weird freaking creepy. So have you ever seen what you thought looked like a person out of the corner of your eye, but they disappear before you get a good look at it? Well, while I was on Netflix and browsing Reddit when I saw a head peeking out from the stairwell, when I looked at it, it was still there. It slowly moved its head back behind the wall. I got a good enough look at it that it seemed to be charred burned. The thing that creeps me out the most is that my puppy who was with me at the time looked at that spot for the next 5 minutes with his hair and ears perked up. Try imagining it with a comical slide whistle. I was followed by a man in a car one night and I'm 100% certain he would have tried to abduct me. This was in Chicago after I helped chaperone a debate team trip. I was walking back to my car and the guy passed me, then circled back and passed again. I honestly thought he thought I was an escort and remember thinking he'd be disappointed if he stopped. Then he started driving next to me at walking speed but had to move when another car came. I crossed and crouched behind a parked car for a minute and when I stood up he was gone. Kept walking and when I got to the next intersection he was hiding on a cross street. I was almost back to my car and he was still following me when I ran into a group of teenage-ish girls. I blurted out, I think that man is following me. Meanwhile dude parks behind my car waiting for me to be alone again. Thankfully the girls walked me to my car and texted me his license plate, but I don't think I've ever felt so unsafe in my life. Ugh. Thank God for those girls. I was on a Girl Scout trip staying in this older house in Sandy Hook. I think I was around 11 or 12. We were all in bed, and for some reason I wanted to go downstairs. I remember hearing the parents talking in the downstairs kitchen, and I was walking toward where I saw a lit up room. then it all disappears, and I'm standing in the middle of an empty dilapidated room. Random crap. Plaster on the floor, no furniture. I freak out and try to retrace my steps back to where I thought the adults were. I wander around for a bit and finally find a staircase. Weird, the staircase was blocked by a couch at the bottom. Then I realize I had been sleepwalking and somehow managed to go up to the 3rd floor where we were told not to go. I was coming home really late one night and I backed my car into the driveway as usual. It was a cloudy, dark night and the porch light was off. The front porch of my house is old and made out of wood. It's about 3-4 feet off of the ground with space to crawl underneath. As I climbed the stairs, I felt my ankle get caught on something, tripping me up a little. I looked down and there was a hand grabbing my ankle. I gasped and kicked my leg back as hard as I could, breaking the grip. I then ran and frantically unlocked the front door. I finally managed to open the door and get in. I was freaked the frick out, but I looked out the front window through a crack in the curtains while finding the number for the police department. The cops showed up later but didn't find anyone and they said they've never heard of this kind of thing happening before. They said they didn't see any footprints or anything underneath the porch either. This was a couple of years ago and I still live in the same house. I tell myself that it was some kids from the neighborhood fricking with me or maybe my friends. No one has ever admitted anything though, but I'll never know for sure I guess. I did buy a motion activated light for the front porch since then. When I was 18, I used to work graveyard shifts at a yacht club, and one night on some downtime I watched The Exorcist III. The yacht club at night was creepy enough. Lots of creaking boats on their moorings, long, dark, poorly lit docks, no one around, and a fire station every 50 feet that included a fire axe, so a potential killer would always have a weapon handy if he needed one. So I was doing my rounds, quietly walking the perimeter of the club, the empty clubhouse and the lengths of the docks, trying not to freak out after so thoroughly freaking myself out. As I was almost finished, I was in a section of dock where some larger boats were moored, so visibility was even worse as I couldn't see over the boats. I walked past one boat when this huge figure, which had been totally quiet until that moment, suddenly lunged toward me screaming incoherently and coming fast. I completely freaked out and for some reason my survival instinct thought it would be a good idea to dive into the water. So it's 3 AM. I'm already terrified and now I'm underwater. Can't see any lights and then can't find the surface because I came up underneath a floating dock. I started panicking and somehow managed to find my way to a gap where I could breathe. I took a breath and then, despite still being in a complete state of panic, I found my way to the edge of the dock and looked up. There stood a crane, still slowly opening and closing its wings in a threat display and still making some shrill loud noise. It must have been sleeping while standing on a post between some boats, and since it was elevated, it looked even bigger than it was, and it was pretty big. I hauled myself out of the water and as the tension and adrenaline left my system, I threw up into the water. I've never felt that kind of primal terror before, both when the crane initially scared me and then when I realized I was underwater, in the dark and couldn't find the surface. It was about 10:30 PM and I'm laying on the couch jamming out through my earbuds and playing on my iPad. I close my eyes while listening to Lithium by Nirvana, when I notice the song just cut out. I open my eyes and I'm outside, in the cul-de-sac at the other end of my neighborhood, about half a mile, wearing nothing but pajama bottoms and just below freezing temperatures, just staring out into a cornfield. I walk back to my house, and when I get to my room I saw it was like 3 AM. Still no clue what happened, but I had apparently scribbled in my school notebooks and put out the fireplace during my little nighttime adventure. I had thought it was all a dream until I woke up the next day and my mom asked about all the grass I had shaken off my pants onto the floor, so that freaked me out pretty bad. Sleepwalking, easily. I've had many times I've fallen asleep listening to a song, where it suddenly cuts out and it's many hours later. You fell asleep and just didn't realize it, waking up later feeling like no time has passed. Accompanied with some sleepwalking, you've got a recipe for spooks. I was out snorkeling with some friends off the eastern coast of Nicaragua. I noticed a shark on the ocean floor just going about his business, so I pop out of the water to yell at my friends that there is a shark just below us. Suddenly I see the shark coming up towards me, which at first I thought was awesome, but as it got closer, I could see it was coming directly at me, which was not awesome. I proceeded to freak out, swimming as fast as I can at the surface of the water, lose a fin and my goggles while I rush to safety. At this point the shark is just a few feet from me as I hurl myself onto the boat only to see the Nicaraguans and my friends laughing hysterically. The shark was apparently caught on one of their lines and the local guy was just slowly dragging him up to the surface to get a better view. I am not normally scared of anything. This was by far the scariest moment of my life. My child, not quite 2, was choking on a metal washer. I did not know what it was at the time. My husband came running to me, holding our son under his arms and told me he was choking. I told him to get our other small kids in the car and call 911. I could not see a thing in his throat and he was going white. I started doing back blows, and if any of you are ever in this situation, you cannot be gentle. If you are around kids, take a class. Anyway, I did abdominal thrusts and still nothing. At this point I came over with this cold feeling and I picked him up with my left arm again, almost completely head down and headed out the door, banging the poor kid between his shoulder blades as I went. My husband had tossed the kids in the back, had the engine started and the phone out. As I went over our step there was a clink and a washer hit the stones. Our son gasped and started to cry. It was a beautiful sound. All was well. I have had bad stuff happen to me but this was far worse. I don't know the amount of time that passed but I think it was less than 2 minutes. Still a heck of a long time to be terrified. He is 14 now and a terrific kid. I am so very grateful to my college first aid instructor. I can't recall his name but he was the top hazardous materials firefighter in Denver at the time. He made us practice dealing with a choking child over and over and I think that course saved my son's life. I was kidnapped when I was 9 years old. I was walking to my friend's house, which was right up the street, maybe 6 houses down or so. Not far at all. My mom had told me to be home for dinner at 6 p.m. Well, when I was walking I noticed a man following me in his car. I naturally get anxious anytime I see someone while I'm walking to this day. Anyway, I started walking a little faster. Kept thinking to myself, only a few more houses. 3, 2. Then he stopped, got out, and grabbed me. Quicker than you can say actually. I can't think of anything, but it happened really fast. Luckily, my friend's dad was sitting on the porch and saw this happen. So he started chasing after the car, running as fast as he could. The man had me sitting in his lap while he was driving, holding me down with one hand, covering my screaming mouth with the other and kept shouting shut up. Well, my friend's dad eventually caught up to the car, about 10 blocks down, out of breath, holding onto the side mirror running with the car, trying to get the door opened. He finally decided it was best to straight up punch through the window and pulled me out of the car with his then bloody hand. He carried me back to my house while I was crying and shaking and told my mom everything. I was traumatized. She reported it to the police but to this day we don't know who that man was. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.